There is something happening in Cleveland right now that most people in sports media are either too scared to say, too financially comfortable to admit, or too deep in their own narrative to even recognize anymore. Shedeur Sanders is winning, not just winning a quarterback competition, winning in a way that exposes something much larger, much uglier, and much more important than any depth chart decision the Cleveland Browns are going to make this summer. What you are watching unfold in Berea right now is one of the most revealing stories in modern sports. It is a story about talent being buried on purpose. It is a story about character being weaponized as a tool. It is a story about a media machine that decided what the conclusion was going to be before the evidence even arrived, and has been scrambling ever since to keep that conclusion alive, while reality tears it apart piece by piece. Welcome to Gridiron Ground. We are the channel that follows the facts wherever they lead, even when the facts make powerful people uncomfortable. Before we go any further, drop one word in the comments right now. Just one word. Tell me what you think about Shedeur Sanders. One word. That is all. Because by the end of this video, that word might change completely. Before moving further, we're pushing for 1,000 subscribers here at Gridiron Ground. If you're enjoying our Browns and Shedeur Sanders coverage, hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. Let's build this community together. To understand what is happening in Cleveland today, you have to go back further than OTAs. You have to go back further than training camp, further than the draft, further than the combine. You have to go back to the moment when someone, somewhere, made a decision that Shedeur Sanders was not going to be allowed to simply be evaluated as a football player. From the very beginning, the coverage surrounding this kid operated differently than the coverage surrounding any other quarterback prospect in recent memory. And the difference was not subtle. It was not a slight tilt in framing or a mild skepticism in tone. It was a coordinated, sustained, relentlessly amplified campaign built around one central idea. That Shedeur Sanders, regardless of what he did on a football field, was not the kind of person the NFL needed to embrace. Now here at Gridiron Ground, we do not make claims like that lightly. We back things up. So let us look at what the record actually shows. Shedeur Sanders entered the pre-draft process as one of the most statistically accomplished quarterback prospects in recent college football history. His accuracy numbers were elite. His ability to read defenses, process information quickly, and distribute the football efficiently in a pro-style system was documented on film that any legitimate scout could access. His completion percentage, his yards per attempt, his performance under pressure, all of it pointed toward a player who was ready to compete at the next level immediately. And yet, when you went looking for that conversation in the weeks leading up to the draft, you had to dig for it. Because the conversation that was actually happening, the one being amplified across every major platform, every major show, every major podcast, was not about his accuracy. It was not about his football IQ. It was not about his processing speed or his mechanics or any of the things scouts spend their careers evaluating. It was about his personality. Specifically, it was about the idea that Shedeur Sanders was too confident, too self-assured, too comfortable in his own skin, too vocal about his belief in his own ability. Words like arrogant and cocky started appearing with a frequency that was simply not matched by any evidence from the people who actually coached him, played with him, or evaluated him in private settings.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Think about what was actually being said, and more importantly, think about what was not being said. The people making noise about character were largely people who had never been in the building. They had never sat in a film room with Shedeur. They had never watched him lead a huddle from 3 feet away. They had never spoken to the people who had. They were working from press conference clips, social media posts, and the inherited assumptions of a sports culture that has a very specific and very narrow idea of what acceptable confidence looks like depending on who is displaying it. Meanwhile, the people who had actually been around Shedeur, his coaches at Colorado, his teammates, the scouts and personnel executives who sat down with him during the pre-draft process, were telling a fundamentally different story. A story about a quarterback who was serious about his craft, who was obsessive about preparation, who walked into every room with the kind of self-belief that you actually want in a franchise quarterback. That story did not generate the same kind of engagement. It did not keep the debate alive, so it got buried. And here is where Gridiron Ground needs you to pay close attention, because this is the part that tells you everything. The NFL draft happened. Shedeur Sanders fell to pick 144, fifth round. The same player who by football metrics should have been a top 10 selection went in the middle of the fifth round because the narrative had done its job. The doubt had been manufactured. The character issue had been planted. And the damage was done before a single NFL team got to see him throw a single pass under live fire. But here is what the people running that narrative did not account for. They did not account for what happens when you take a player with that kind of talent, that kind of chip on his shoulder, that kind of fuel burning inside him, and you give him a reason. They gave Shedeur Sanders the greatest motivational gift a competitor can receive. They told him the world did not believe in him. And if you know anything about how elite competitors respond to that kind of message, you already know what comes next. Subscribe to Gridiron Ground right now if you want to be here when it arrives. Hit that button and that bell, because what is coming in this video is going to completely reframe everything you thought you knew about this story. The moment Shedeur Sanders arrived in Cleveland and began competing for the starting quarterback job, something remarkable happened. The same voices that spent months telling you he was too confident, too vocal, too in love with himself, too much of a problem personality for a professional locker room, those same voices looked at a young man who was giving measured, professional, team-first answers and found a completely new set of complaints. Suddenly, the problem was that he was not bold enough. Suddenly, the player who had been crucified for being too cocky was being criticized for failing to make big public declarations about wanting to be the starter. Personalities who had spent the better part of a year treating his confidence as a character flaw were now sitting behind their microphones saying he should be more like Baker Mayfield, more aggressive, more declarative, more willing to treat the competition like a public spectacle. Let that sink in for a moment. The same people, the same talking points, completely opposite complaints, and not a single one of them.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Them acknowledge the contradiction. What you need to understand about this pivot is that it was not accidental. It was not a genuine recalibration of analysis based on new information. It was the natural behavior of a narrative that has been set in advance and then retrofitted to whatever the subject actually does. When the conclusion is decided before the evidence arrives, any evidence can be made to fit. Confidence becomes arrogance. Professionalism becomes deflection. Team-first answers become a lack of competitive fire. It is a closed loop, and the only way out of a closed loop is to recognize that you are inside one. Shedeur Sanders recognized it. That much is obvious from the way he has handled every single public moment since arriving in Cleveland. He does not argue with the framing. He does not engage with the manufactured controversy. He does not sit in front of cameras and relitigate the draft or the pre-draft narrative or the fifth-round pick story. He talks about his teammates. He talks about his own development. He talks about the system Todd Monken is installing and what he needs to do to master it. He talks about building chemistry with receivers, about the details in his footwork, about the mental discipline required to be great at this position over a long career. And every single time he does that, the people who need the chaos to continue find a new way to turn it into a problem. If Shedeur talks about his teammates, he is deflecting from the real issue. If he talks about his own development, he is avoiding direct questions about the competition. If he expresses confidence in a measured way, he is performing for the cameras. If he expresses humility, he has already conceded the competition. There is no answer he can give that satisfies the people asking the question, because satisfying them was never the point of asking it. Now contrast that with what is actually happening inside the building, because here is the thing about the impossible standard being applied to Shedeur's press conference behavior. The people who actually matter in this equation, the coaches who design the offense, the front office that manages the roster, the teammates who line up next to him every single day, are not evaluating him based on how bold his media answers are. They are evaluating him based on what he does when the cameras are off. And what he does when the cameras are off is apparently extraordinary, because the feedback coming out of that building, from credible people in positions of genuine authority, is not the careful, hedged, manage expectations language you typically hear from organizations trying to protect a project player. It is genuine excitement. It is the kind of language coaches use when a player has not just met the bar, but has pushed through it in a way that was not fully anticipated. Todd Monken, who built his career at the highest levels of this game and helped develop one of the great modern quarterbacks, is using the word miles, not steps, not inches, miles, to describe how far Shedeur has come in his progressions, in his decision speed, in his command of the offensive system since January. Andrew Barry, the general manager who will ultimately make this roster decision, went on record and said the growth has been tremendous. Tremendous. That is not a word a general manager uses when he is trying to buy time or manage a situation. That is a word you use when you are genuinely impressed. The impossible standard being applied to Shedeur Sanders in the media has failed to account for one critical variable. The people setting the real standard inside that building have already told you he is meeting it. And what those people say about a player they evaluate every single day carries infinitely more weight than what someone behind a microphone says about a player they have never coached, never practiced with, and never evaluated up close. Let us talk about something that almost nobody in this conversation is being fully honest about. The nightmare scenario, not for the Browns organization, not for Shedeur Sanders, but for the specific voices who have spent the last 18 months building significant audiences on the back of Shedeur Sanders' doubt. Think carefully about what it actually means for those voices, if this competition resolves clearly and definitively in either direction. If Deshaun Watson wins the starting job and plays well through a full season, that creates one set of problems for the chaos narrative. The organization moves forward, the situation stabilizes, and the people who spent months predicting a quarterback disaster in Cleveland have to quietly watch a storyline they owned collapse into an ordinary football story with an ordinary resolution. But the truly catastrophic scenario, the one that represents a genuine existential threat to...
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Certain content strategies is the second one. Shedeur Sanders wins the job, takes the field as the starter, plays well, becomes the long-term franchise quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. If that happens, every single piece of the narrative built against him does not just become wrong, it becomes evidence. Evidence of the specific, documented, time-stamped nature of the era. You cannot quietly delete 18 months of content. You cannot slowly walk back a position when the audience remembers every take you delivered with complete conviction. The record exists. The clips exist. The timestamps exist. And an audience that trusted you to be right about something this significant is going to have a very direct and very uncomfortable question for you. This is why the goalpost keeps moving. This is why the conversation never settles. This is why every time evidence arrives that should logically end the debate, a new angle materializes to keep it alive a little longer. It is not analysis. It is financial survival. Keeping the doubt alive is not about serving the audience. It is about protecting the platform that was built on the doubt. Here at Gridiron Ground, we built this channel on something different. We built it on following the evidence even when the evidence is inconvenient, even when it means saying out loud that a narrative we once found compelling has been demolished by reality. That is what integrity in this space actually looks like. And that is why we need you subscribed and locked in, because the people telling you the truth about this story are not always the ones with the biggest platforms. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because Gridiron Ground is going to be on this story from today straight through every single day of training camp. Now let us talk about the specific mechanism through which the nightmare scenario gets delayed. Because the people who have the most to lose from Shedeur's success are not simply sitting back and hoping things go wrong for him. They are actively constructing the conditions under which things could go wrong. The pitch sounds reasonable on the surface. Sit Shedeur for the first half of the season. Let Watson play 8 games. Bring Shedeur in for the second half. Give both guys a fair shot at the job. Frame it as patience, as development, as what is genuinely best for the young quarterback's long-term growth. But anyone who watched what happened in 7 games last season understands exactly what that structure actually produces. You know what Cleveland weather looks like in November. You know what throwing in a 20-degree wind chill on the lake feels like for a quarterback still building chemistry with receivers who spent the first 8 weeks preparing for a different starter. You know what happens to statistics and to narratives when a quarterback is working under those conditions with those limitations. And then when the numbers are modest, the verdict arrives on schedule. Not enough games, not enough of a sample size, unclear picture. And suddenly the door opens to move on from everyone and restart the cycle completely. It is a trap dressed up as patience, and the people proposing it know exactly what it is. There is a psychological dimension to this entire conversation that deserves more attention than it gets, because it explains behavior that otherwise seems almost irrational from the outside. Think about what it actually costs someone to admit they were catastrophically wrong about a major public take. Not a small wrong, not a minor misread on a game prediction. A months-long, audience-building, platform-defining level of wrong. The kind of wrong where you told people with complete confidence and conviction that a player was not good enough, did not belong, had character problems, was only in the conversation because of his last name. And then reality arrived and contradicted every single element of that position. Admitting that kind of wrong is not just embarrassing. It is genuinely dangerous to your livelihood. It costs you the audience that agreed with you and built loyalty around the shared position. It validates every voice that disagreed with you and gives that voice credibility at your expense. It forces you to re-examine not just the specific take, but the entire evaluative framework that produced it. Because if you were this wrong about Shedeur Sanders, what else have you been wrong about? What other conclusions did you reach in advance, and then retrofit evidence to support? That question is unbearable for most people who make a living in public. So instead of answering it, they find a new angle. They move the goalpost. They locate a new variable that allows the original conclusion to survive just a little longer. First, the goalpost was he will never get drafted in a position that reflects his ability. That one fell when Cleveland selected him. Then it became he will never make the roster seriously. That fell when he made the team and earned starts. Then it became he will never beat out Dillon Gabriel for a legitimate role. That fell when Gabriel's manufactured depth chart controversy dissolved. Then it became he will never seriously challenge Watson. That goalpost is falling right now in Berea, with every practice report that comes out of that facility. And the new one, already being constructed and set in place, is that OTA performance does not translate, that you cannot know anything until the pads go on, that 7 games is not enough of a sample size to make a real judgment, that there are still too many unknowns to reach a definitive conclusion. The standard keeps moving because the original conclusion remains frozen. And that is not sports analysis. That is a psychological defense mechanism wearing a sports media costume. It is the mental equivalent of a person who has committed to a wrong answer on a test and is now spending the remainder of the exam constructing arguments for why the grading rubric is unfair rather than simply changing the answer.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Compare that psychological response to what LeGarrette Blount did. Super Bowl champion, former NFL running back, a man who understands this game from the inside in a way that most commentators simply do not. He went public with the fact that he had concerns about Shedeur. He was skeptical. He had questions about the character, about the off-field signals, about whether this was a player a professional locker room would genuinely embrace. And then he said he was wrong. No hedging. No, I still have some lingering concerns, but the evidence is encouraging. He said the feedback from people inside the building was clear, that Shedeur is professional, serious, charismatic in all the right ways, and exactly the kind of player a locker room builds its identity around. And he said he was on the train. That is intellectual honesty. That is what updating a position actually looks like when you have the courage to do it. And the reason it stands out so sharply is because of how rare it is in the current landscape. LeGarrette Blount did, in one public moment, what dozens of other voices have refused to do across hundreds of hours of content. He let the evidence change his mind. The question this entire conversation forces you to ask is a simple one. Are you watching sports media to be informed or to be validated? Because those two things are not always the same. And the voices that have been covering Shedeur Sanders for the last 18 months have been optimized for the second one in a way that has made the first one almost impossible. Now let us talk about what is actually happening on that practice field. Because through all of this noise, all of the philosophical arguments about chaos and narratives and psychological defense mechanisms, there is a real football competition taking place in Berea. And based on every credible, documented, independently sourced account available right now, Shedeur Sanders is winning it. Beat reporters who are physically present at those practices, people who are standing on the sidelines watching the reps in real time, not watching highlight clips after the fact, not relying on second-hand accounts, but physically present and watching with their own eyes. Those reporters have said consistently and independently that they cannot think of a full-speed period in recent weeks where Shedeur was not leading things off with the first-team offense. One reporter said plainly that Shedeur clearly did more than Watson at the OTA practices she witnessed. Not slightly more, not arguably more, clearly more. Those are precise, deliberate words from a professional whose job is to accurately describe what she witnessed. She is not a fan account. She is not a YouTube channel with a declared rooting interest. She is a reporter doing her job and telling you what she saw. And the information coming from inside the building, from private conversations that have filtered out through people close to the situation, is even more significant than what is being reported on the surface. The coaching staff is not just quietly satisfied with where Shedeur is in his development. The word being used in those private conversations is excited. Genuinely, specifically, notably excited. The picture that emerges from those private conversations is one of a quarterback who was given a very specific blueprint back in January, when Todd Monken sat down with him on day one and laid out exactly what winning this job would require. Fix the footwork, clean up the progressions, get the ball out faster, eliminate the negative plays. Establish yourself as a leader in that locker room not through words but through the consistency of your daily behavior. Shedeur took that blueprint and went to work in January and February when there were no cameras, no beat reporters, no practice footage being distributed. He kept working through the spring. He showed up to OTAs not as a player hoping to maintain his position, but as a player who had already done the work and was showing the results. And the result of that disciplined, private, unglamorous process is a coaching staff that is, by credible private accounts, more excited about this young man's future than anything that is being reported publicly. The teammates are saying similar things when they get in front of a camera without a prepared statement. They talk about Shedeur's preparation being elite. They talk about the way he carries himself in the building. They talk about how he invests in relationships with young receivers, building chemistry through consistent effort rather than expecting it to just exist because of his position on the depth chart. They talk about a quarterback who makes the people around him better, which is ultimately the most important thing a quarterback can do. One teammate captured it simply when he talked about the growth visible from the moment Shedeur first arrived to right now, not just in football terms, in the way he leads, in the energy he brings to every single day, in the example he sets for everyone watching him work. That testimony comes from someone who is in that building every day and feels the energy of this competition firsthand. That testimony is worth more than a week of debate segments from people 200 miles away recycling the same talking points they have been using since last spring. The people closest to the situation are telling you something clearly. The only question is whether you are choosing to listen to them or to the noise. Coach Prime, when he spoke privately to people close to the situation, did not tear Deshaun Watson down or inflate his son's status with hyperbole. He spoke about both men with the kind of respect that comes from someone who genuinely understands what it costs a competitor to show up every day and fight for something. And then he said simply, quietly, without performance or drama, that he knows how Shedeur is. That Shedeur is ready to go. That is not a hot take designed for engagement. That is a man who has watched his son prepare in private, who knows what the work ethic looks like when there is no audience, and who is telling you in the most understated possible way that the preparation has been done and the results are coming. Here is what the Shedeur Sanders story has revealed about the ecosystem of sports media that most people inside that ecosystem would prefer you did not examine too closely. The chaos is not a byproduct of the coverage. The chaos is the product. It is the thing being manufactured and distributed intentionally because it generates the engagement numbers that everything else depends on. Understanding this changes the way you should consume every piece of content surrounding this story. When you see a headline asking whether Shedeur can beat out Watson, the question is not designed to inform you. It is designed to provoke you. It is engineered to make you feel something strongly enough to click, to comment, to share, to argue. The engagement is the revenue. The certainty of the conclusion is irrelevant because the certainty would end the engagement. This is why the conversation about Shedeur Sanders has never resolved despite the consistent arrival of new evidence that should logically move it toward resolution. Because resolution is the enemy of the content strategy. A settled question generates no clicks. An answered debate generates no arguments. A narrative that has been definitively closed by reality is worthless to a platform that depends on the narrative staying open. So the goalpost gets moved, not because new evidence has arrived that genuinely warrants reconsideration, but because the old goalpost was about to get scored through, and a new one needed to be set up before the audience noticed. The entire operation runs on the assumption that most viewers are not tracking the history of the conversation carefully enough to notice that the specific complaint about Shedeur Sanders has changed 6 times in 18 months, while the conclusion has remained identical throughout. But something has changed in this particular story that is making the manufactured chaos strategy significantly harder to execute than it used to be. The receipts are becoming impossible to ignore, not because any single piece of evidence is overwhelming on its own, but because the volume, the consistency, and the independence of the sources producing positive assessments of Shedeur's development have reached a critical mass that cannot be explained away by a single alternative narrative. When it was just fan accounts saying Shedeur looked good in practice, the noise machine could dismiss it as bias. When it was just general enthusiasm from people with an emotional stake in his success, the dismissal was easy. But now it is the head coach using the word miles. It is the general manager using the word tremendous. It is beat reporters with professional reputations on the line saying clearly and independently that Shedeur is leading first-team reps in a way that cannot be explained by favoritism or coincidence. The architecture of the counter-narrative is cracking under the weight of what the building is actually producing, and the people whose entire content strategy depends on that architecture remaining intact are running out of structural support. This is the moment in the story where Gridiron Ground needs you to be subscribed and paying close attention, because what is about to happen in training camp and then in the regular season is going to require the kind of honest, evidence-based coverage that cuts through the noise and tells you what is actually happening rather than what generates the most outrage. Subscribe right now if you have not already done it. Hit that bell, because we are going to be here every single day this summer covering this story the way it deserves to be covered, with facts, with context, with the willingness to say clearly what the evidence actually shows. The people who have been wrong about Shedeur Sanders are not going to suddenly become honest about it when the proof arrives in the fall. They are going to find new angles, new variables, new reasons why the evidence in front of you does not mean what you think it means. And when that happens, you need a channel that has been tracking the history of this conversation carefully enough to show you exactly when and how, and why the goalpost moved each time. That channel is Gridiron Ground, and the story we have been telling about Shedeur Sanders is the story the evidence has been telling all along. Training camp is coming, the pads are going on, the joint practices against the Buffalo Bills are going to happen, and then September arrives. And when September arrives, the conversation that has been sustained by speculation and manufactured doubt and strategically moved goalposts is going to have to answer to the only currency that actually matters in this business: what happens on the field. And here is what Gridiron Ground is telling you right now, before a single training camp snap, based on everything the coaching staff has said, everything the front office has said, everything the reporters on the ground have independently confirmed, and everything the teammates have described. Shedeur Sanders is going to be standing under center for the Cleveland Browns when the regular season begins. Not because of his last name, not because the organization is managed sentimentally, not because Coach Prime lobbied anyone or called in a favor, because the man has outperformed every expectation placed in front of him since January, because he took a blueprint that was handed to him by one of the best offensive minds in this game and executed it with a discipline and a seriousness that has genuinely surprised people who were prepared to be skeptical. The joint practices against Buffalo are going to be important in this story, not because they will be decisive on their own, but because they represent the first time Shedeur Sanders will be operating against a legitimate, high-level defense with real competitive stakes, in a setting where every credible observer in attendance is going to be watching closely and reporting honestly on what they see. Those joint practices are going to generate evidence that even the most committed noise merchants are going to struggle to explain away. And then the preseason games will produce film, real film, live reps against real competition under real pressure conditions, film that evaluators can study frame by frame and that reporters can describe in specific, granular terms that go beyond the broad assessments of OTA performance. That film is going to tell a story. And based on everything that has been building since January, the story it tells is going to make for very uncomfortable viewing for certain people who have invested heavily in a different outcome. Here at Gridiron Ground, we have been on the right side of this story since before it was easy to be on the right side of it. We told you the pre-draft narrative was manufactured. We told you the character issue was a weapon, not an observation. We told you the goalpost was going to keep moving. And we are telling you now that the final goalpost is about to get set, and this time there is no more field left to move it to. The regular season is the truth serum that dissolves every manufactured narrative, every convenient reframing, every carefully constructed alternative explanation. You cannot argue with 17 games of film. You cannot explain away a season-long body of work with sample-size arguments. And you cannot maintain a platform built on someone's failure when that person is succeeding in the most documented, most publicly visible, most rigorously scrutinized arena in American sports. When Shedeur Sanders is standing in Jacksonville for the Browns season opener, every single person who spent 18 months telling you he did not belong there is going to have a choice to make. They can do what LeGarrette Blount did. They can be honest, acknowledge that the evidence destroyed their position, and update with the grace and intellectual courage that genuine credibility requires. Or they can keep moving, keep finding new angles, keep constructing new barriers between the evidence and the conclusion they have refused to abandon. That choice will tell you everything you need to know about what those voices were actually doing this whole time. It will tell you whether you were watching analysis or entertainment, whether you were being informed or manipulated, whether the platform you gave those voices your time and attention was built on honesty or on the manufactured chaos of a young man's struggle being used as raw material for someone else's content strategy. Gridiron Ground is built on something different. It is built on the belief that you deserve to know what the evidence actually shows, even when the evidence is inconvenient, even when it contradicts a position this channel once found compelling. That is what we are here to give you. And that is why we need you subscribed, locked in, and ready. Because the most important chapter of this story is just getting started. Hit that subscribe button. Tell a friend. Because what is coming this fall is going to be worth watching from the very beginning. Let us bring this full circle. Because at its core, the Shedeur Sanders story is not really about quarterback competitions or depth charts or OTA reps or training camp battles. Those things matter. They are real. They are consequential for the people involved and for the franchise affected. But they are not the most important part of what has been unfolding since before that kid even stepped foot in an NFL facility. The most important part is what this story has revealed about the machinery that shapes how you think about sports. How narratives get manufactured before evidence exists. How those narratives get sustained long after evidence arrives to contradict them. How the people who built platforms on those narratives find creative, financially motivated ways to keep the doubt alive past its natural expiration date. And more importantly, what this story has revealed about what happens when someone refuses to be defined by that machinery. Shedeur Sanders did not respond to the pre-draft narrative with noise. He responded with work. He did not respond to the fifth-round slide with resentment that played out in press conferences. He responded with a professional focus that has impressed every credible evaluator who has gotten close enough to see it clearly. He did not respond to the impossible standard with frustration. He responded by rendering the standard irrelevant through the consistency of his daily performance. And the result of all of that quiet, unglamorous, disciplined, camera-off work is a coaching staff that uses the word miles, a general manager that uses the word tremendous, a locker room that describes him the way you want your franchise quarterback to be described, a football competition that by every honest, independent, credibly sourced account available right now, he is winning. He is winning against a 30-year-old former Pro Bowl quarterback coming off an Achilles tear and carrying the weight of a narrative that turned against him long before his physical recovery was complete. He is winning against the organizational inertia that tends to favor incumbents and familiar options over unproven challengers. He is winning against a media ecosystem that has been, for purely financial reasons, rooting for his failure from the very beginning. And he is doing all of it without making it about himself, without turning the press conferences into a referendum on the unfairness of his situation, without giving the chaos machine the emotional raw material it needs to keep the story alive in the wrong direction. That kind of character under that kind of sustained pressure is not something you teach. It is not something that shows up in a pre-draft psychological evaluation. It is something you either have or you do not. And Shedeur Sanders has it in a way that the people who spent 18 months questioning his character were simply too invested in their own narrative to see. The pads are going on soon. The games are coming. The evidence is about to graduate from practice reports and private conversations and coaching staff assessments to the most public, most permanent, most undeniable form of proof that exists in this sport. 17 weeks of NFL football, filmed from every angle, studied by every analyst, documented in every box score, and reviewed by every fan who ever clicked on a video asking whether Shedeur Sanders belonged. He belongs. He has always belonged. And the fall is going to prove it in a way that makes every moved goalpost, every shifted narrative, every manufactured doubt look exactly like what it was all along. The chaos was never about Shedeur Sanders. The chaos was about the people who needed it, and the ladder they have been climbing on his back is about to run out of rungs. Here is what Gridiron Ground wants you to walk away from this video understanding. The Shedeur Sanders story is bigger than one quarterback and one competition and one franchise. It is a case study in how modern sports media actually functions when commercial incentives override the basic obligation to be honest with the audience. What happened to this young man in the pre-draft process was not journalism. It was not analysis. It was the use of a real human being's ambition and talent and character as raw material for content that was optimized for outrage rather than accuracy. And the fact that those responsible are still operating, still shifting their positions, still finding new angles to keep the doubt alive, tells you something important about the current state of the media landscape you are consuming every single day. But here is the thing that makes this story genuinely hopeful rather than just infuriating. It did not work. The machinery ran full throttle for 18 months. Every lever was pulled. Every angle was tried. Every goalpost was moved. And Shedeur Sanders is still standing in Berea, still winning a quarterback competition, still earning the respect of coaches and teammates and reporters who have gotten close enough to see the truth clearly. The truth is stubborn like that. You can bury it for a while. You can manufacture noise around it. You can keep it from trending on a Tuesday afternoon, but you cannot eliminate it. And when the fall arrives and the truth walks onto that field in a Cleveland Browns uniform, no amount of manufactured chaos is going to be able to look away from it. Gridiron Ground will be here for every single moment of it. Drop your one-word reaction to this entire story in the comments right now. We read every single one. We will see you at training camp.